Hello, I'm Mark Martinez. This is Student-Led World History, and today we're going to talk about everything you need to know about the big boys from 1200 to 1450. First, we're going to start off with China. China was ruled by the Song dynasty starting in the 10th century until 1279. By 1200, the Song was severely weakened and only controlled southern China. By 1271, the Mongols had come in and established the Great Yuan, the first Chinese dynasty led by foreigners, and not the last. While the Yuan had great success in reviving the Silk Road, their success was short-lived. By 1367, the Red Turbans, a Chinese peasant uprising, ousted the Mongols, establishing the Ming dynasty. The Ming were seen as a return to form for China, adopting strict Confucian ideals. And unlike the Mongols, the Ming built boats. One of the crowning accomplishments of the Ming was the Voyage of Jung Ho. Jung Ho was a Muslim sailor who traveled across the Indian Ocean with an entourage of Chinese junk ships, letting people know China was back on the map. These huge junk ships allowed China to set up a vast tribute network, a system where in exchange for not getting killed, smaller states would give China goodies and acknowledge their supremacy. But this would all change under Ming Emperor Hongwu, who promoted isolationism, and the seat to world power was once again left vacant. You know who else had a tribute system? The Aztecs. Jumping to the Americas, the Aztecs were a coalition of 3 city-states, Tenochtitlan, Tlacopan, and Texcoco. The Aztec or Mexica came to dominate this area with their capital at Tenochtitlan, built on Lake Texcoco. This city was really cool, so much so that a certain conquistador said, "We were amazed," and some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream. The Aztecs had a sophisticated tribute system, where conquered states would give goods and services to their overlords in Tenochtitlan. These were organized into tribute lists, which would later be used by the Spanish. Bouncing down to South America, we're going to talk about the Inca. Despite having one of the largest and most populated empires of the century, the Inca weren't dealt the best hand in life. The empire consisted of wildly varied terrain, from mountains to grassland to coast. Despite all this, the Inca maintained a cohesive empire. The empire was divided into 4 quarters, called Tawantinsuyu. Instead of developing a system of written language, the Inca used a system of knotted ropes called quipus. These ropes would be transported by runners known as chasquis, since the only other mode of transportation was the llama, and llamas aren't that fast. The Inca used something called the Maida system, a labor tax, where men from different alus or communities would do labor for the government, building the empire's valued infrastructure. Remember this term, it's pretty important. Speaking of pretty important, it's time to talk about the Mongols, the largest overland empire ever. The Mongols were a nomadic people who inhabited the steppe region of Central Asia. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, they got really big, and then split into 4 parts, called khanates, like most empires run by warlords who suck at administration. The Mongols managed to topple the Abbasid Caliphate, the center of the Islamic world, in all of its scholarly goodness. That's when they realized, wow, we suck at administration, so they started moving Islamic scholars all across the empire in something called the Yam system. The Mongols accrued immense military victories because of their adaptability. They were early adapters of gunpowder, and quickly became masters of siege warfare. The Mongols managed to create a remarkably safe empire for travelers. So much so that a Venetian merchant turned writer you've probably heard of, Marco Polo, praised the status of overland trade routes for their safety. But with all that trade comes some bad stuff. These trade routes were almost single-handedly responsible for the spread of the Black Death, which devastated Eurasia. Speaking of Eurasia, Byzantium. Oh come on, that was a weak transition. Also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, was the center of the Eastern Orthodox Church. This religion eventually spread to Kiev and Rus, which would later become the Orthodox capital of the world. But we're not there yet. Centered around Constantinople, the empire's capital, Byzantium participated in lucrative overland and maritime trade. This wealth went into cultural and artistic projects. The Hagia Sophia, commissioned by Emperor Justinian, was the pride and joy of Byzantine art. Just look at that sweet dome. Gradually, the Byzantine Empire lost most of its territory and fell into disarray. By the mid-15th century, the empire had lost nearly all of its influence outside of the walls of Constantinople, and by 1453, the capital was conquered. Moving up the globe, man, we really need to work on these transitions. Feudalism was the main form of social organization in Western Europe. Basically, land was owned by a monarch. The lands were divided into fiefs, which were given to nobles in exchange for providing military support to the king during times of war. Peasants worked for nobles on the fiefs and primarily produced food for the realm. But in the 15th century, European states began to reorganize themselves into states called new monarchies. Good examples of these being England and France, which had a much more centralized administration under a single monarch. That's everything you need to know about the big boys from 1200 to 1450. Tune in next time where we go more in depth on this time period's trade and commerce. But until then, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.